Hi, I'm Angel Karns, and I'm going to do my TED Talk on Steve Jobs. What makes a leader? According to Goleman, a leader is a person with a group of 5 skills that enable the best leaders to maximize their own and their followers' performance. Steve Jobs was an innovator, designer, and entrepreneur. He was the co founder and CEO of Apple Computer. Steve was born in San Francisco, California in 1955 and was put up for adoption. When Steve was 13 years old, he met Stephen Wozniak, who would become a very important person in his life. Steve enrolled in college when he was 18 but dropped out soon after. There was one calligraphy class that Steve attributed to the multiple typefaces and spaced fonts for Apple. After Steve dropped out of college in 1974, he took a job at Atari as a video game maker. The money he made at Atari is what he used to travel through India in search of finding himself, where he experimented with drugs. The experiences he encountered during his trip are what helped him discover what really mattered in life and business. In 1976, after he returned from his trip, he teamed up with Stephen Wozniak again, and this is when the company Apple Computer was created. Steve and Stephen started this company in the home garage where Steve lived. The company was successful, and within a few years, the Apple Computer became a staple in homes. Steve designed the first Macintosh in 1984, which became the first successful home computer with a graphic user interface. Arrogance and lack of leadership would come to haunt Steve as he was relieved of any duties at Apple and he resigned in 1985. He sold all of his shares of the company but one. Even though he was upset about what happened with Apple, he did not lay down. He was bound and determined to one up Apple, and he created the next company. He created a computer that was easy to use, faster, and reliable. In 1988, the Next Cube was released. It was overpriced and did not see the sales that Steve had envisioned. After 2 years, the company began to fail. This failure was devastating for Steve. He lost his focus on work and began to focus more on his personal life. At the same time that Steve had created the next company, he also gained interest in computer graphics of the Lucasfilm empire. In 1986, Steve bought the company graphics division from George Lucas, which became Pixar Animation Studios. His vision for Pixar was to sell high-end workstations for hospitals and the military. Sales of the workstations were not great, so this led Pixar to drop the production of workstations and focus solely on software. In 1991, Pixar and Disney teamed up to create a computer animated movie. It took 4 years to create, but in 1995, Toy Story was released. At this time, Steve's other company, Next, was pretty much dying, and Apple was not doing so good either. In 1996, Apple was finding it hard to compete with Microsoft and realized they needed a new operating system. This is when they chose to buy Next's operating system from Steve. This brought Steve back to Apple, the company that he originally founded. The CEO at that time was still unable to bring Apple the success it needed, and this is where Steve formulated a plan to bring Apple back to the top. This plan is what landed Steve the title of interim CEO of Apple. He was determined to bring Apple back to the top, and he refused to stop. He invested all of his time and resources. In 1988, an innovative product was introduced, the iMac. Only 3 years into his title as interim CEO, Apple was back on top. In 2000, the interim would be dropped and Steve would officially become the CEO of Apple. Steve did not take this title for granted. This is where you can see his leadership skills had greatly improved from his earlier years. He set his focus on the company, his employees shared the vision, and he gained their trust, where in turn he achieved great success. Steve was diagnosed with cancer and still continued to make Apple successful. He made sure that upon his death, Apple would continue to remain on top. He hired a dean from a school of management to create Apple University. He wanted to make sure the future Apple executives knew Apple's vision so that it could operate without him. Steve Jobs was known to many as arrogant, dictatorial, and mean-spirited. Despite his bad qualities, he was a great leader. Just as we have learned in class, Steve had the qualities of being an effective leader because he had a vision, he had a passion for the company and its employees, and he inspired trust. When Steve talked about how hard he was on people, he would reply, Look at the results. These are smart people I work with, and any of them could get a top job at another place if they were truly feeling brutalized, but they don't. Steve was also known for writing on whiteboards, as he felt in control of the situation and helped everyone focus on what was being discussed. Steve was known for pushing people to do things that were not normally possible. His employees named this ability his reality distortion field. To the person that did not know him, they would think he was bullying, but to the person who knew him, knew this ability would empower them to do things they normally wouldn't be able to do. Most people may not agree with the leadership style that Steve was known for, and that is okay, because what might work for some does not work for others. This is why I chose to do my TED Talk on Steve, because I was inspired by the fact that he came from nothing and started a company that was successful and remains successful today, even after his death. Thank you.